So, good day, panelists. I am Jasper J.A. Orhe, and today we will discuss in the study that we did in regards to the quantitative study about the students' perceptions about open source software with regards to grade 12 STEM students of CITU. So, before we start, I would like you to introduce to my co-researcher first. Mr. CJ Anthony Bohols, Mr. Ali Zernacena, Miss Denise D. Cabanya, Mr. Darnab Gabahoki, Mr. Troy Homauas, and Miss Laika Perel Fernandez Apostol. And lastly, Mr. Joseph Andre Bergente.
Background of the study. Open source software is software that has the source code available for anyone to examine, edit, and improve. Most computer users never review source code, which is the code that computer programmers can edit to change how a piece of software, a program, or application works. Programmers with access to the computer software source code can improve it by adding new features or addressing portions that don't always perform properly. Open source software, also known as OSS, is a computer software whose underlying source code is made publicly available under a license. Open source first emerged during the 1970s with Richard Stallman from MIT, who popularized the term free software. Richard and others were getting increasingly disgruntled with proprietary software providers, constraints, and the trend toward proprietary software becoming more and more required, also known as closed source. Commercial companies usually restrict access to the source code to protect their intellectual property. The binary is regularly released, while the source code is rarely. Richard's goal was twofold: to encourage more software developers to make their source code open, and to aim to build a fully open source software platform based on the Unix philosophy and design. So let us now talk about the main idea, purpose, and the focal point of our study. Main idea: knowing how open source software affects CITU STEM students in grade 12. Our purpose is to understand how open source software can benefit CITU grade 12 STEM students. And the focus of our study is about determining open source software's usefulness to students.
Statement of the problem. Nowadays, many students are using open source software without knowing what the disadvantages. This study aims to determine the problem of open source software for grade 12 STEM student at Cebu Institute of Technology University. Specifically, the researchers aspire to answer these following questions. How do universities support their students in open source platform? What are the security risks and problem of using open source software? And lastly, how do students accommodate the basic requirements for the software to fully function?
For our theoretical background, here is what we would like to happen if our grade 12 STEM students actually use open source software. Number 1, students will be able to master how virtual classes work. Number 2, increasing productivity is one of the benefits of open source software, since most of them are for educational purposes. Number 3, improvement of overall knowledge of the computer. Number 4, since different types of universities have been able to produce courses that are freely accessible to the worldwide education community, where students can easily access for their schoolwork. Number 5, will be prepared to use open source software in the future when applying for a job. Lastly, number 6, makes it simpler for students to collaborate and achieve goals rather than having to do everything on their own.
Next one will be our related review of literature.
Software by open source. Open source software comes in all shapes and sizes and can serve multiple purposes.
Examples include Linux, Apache, Firefox, KOffice, Thunderbird, OpenOffice, Moodle, and Squirrelmail by Lal 2019.
Thus, using software made with open source allows you to be more efficient with your time. Makes browsing through the internet easier and safer with software made by open source. Allows a more stable connection with the web page to prevent it from lagging and disconnecting. Will help you cope in today's world since a lot of devices have access to the internet, which can allow you to have access to open source software.
Also, in addition to that, you should also help developers practice their coding skills by seeing, exploring, and modifying current codes. Because there are software such as AngularJS, Atom, Azure, Bitbucket, Bootstrap, and many other more that programmers can use. And gives programmers the freedom to change or copy specific codes and develop it themselves without any worry about copyrights. Opportunity for coders to expand their knowledge and improve by exploring without cost or low cost. This also provides transparency to students and teachers and would lead a better learning outcomes.
The research instrument we'll be using is survey questionnaire. In the first part of our survey, we asked our respondents their full name, gender, email address, and their class section. In the second part, the first question we asked our respondent is, did they ever use any of these software? The options are open source software, pirated software, and proprietary software. The second question is, which operating system have they ever used? The options are Windows, Mac OS, and Android. The third question is, which of the following open source software they are currently using? The options are Moodle, Chrome, VLC Media Player, Microsoft Office, and Firefox. The fourth question is, which of the following open source software product you find very useful for us students, especially on online classes? The options are Moodle, Chrome, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Firefox. The fifth question is a yes or no question. We asked them if, in their own experience, is open source software important to us.